Good morning. Welcome to another music and psychology series. This song I'm going to be doing again is off of the Akae Beka album, and it's going to be song number 1, Don't Feel No Way. This song he starts out as peaking systems implode and transmutate the human road because of resurfacing knowledge, like in Qatna in Syria, in the home. So what is he talking about there? Well, as all these systems that have been built um, are coming to an end and they're imploding, right? This is part of what is going on in the world the last couple of years, right? Is things are coming apart, right? And they're imploding on themselves. And as that's happening, finally the wisdom, let's say, of or the our true history is starting to resurface, right? And it's not just in Africa. He's talking about Africa because that's his close background, right? Which, but as we can see, it's actually happening all around the world for all different cultures. And so he talks about we and transmuting the human roads. We're coming to a higher, we're transmuting to a higher level here, right? So he's talking about this is we're going to a higher place, and as we're going higher and our consciousness goes higher, as we are, the great judgment is happening and the great awakening, and that's what the higher consciousness is. And then he talks about like resurfacing knowledge and like Qatna. Well, Qatna was a ancient city from about 5,000 years ago, and it was an abundant, amazing city. And you look in ancient texts from back then, and you couldn't find that name. But then it resurfaced slowly through archaeological discoveries, and they found out that the history we've been told by the Romans or everything past that point was like a great reset where they deleted and burned all the true history, right? So he's talking about the resurfacing of true history. And then the next part he goes, where the lion's resurfaces cut in stone, it was a pre-Hittite bronze. So he's talking about like the pre-Hittite Bronze Age, I'd imagine, and he's talking about like the lion cut out of stone. I would imagine he's talking about the Sphinx, or and so he's like, the extent of the reach of the African, I see it. The Egyptian and Ethiopian inscription, should it cause a social breach? So he's saying like all the inscriptions in stone, all this stuff that's pointing at something, right? You can draw all your pictures if you want and do all you want. You can delete history all you want, but we have proof that you're telling a story that's not true, right? And that's what people we saw big time in the 1800s, is a great reset where they destroyed a lot of ancient architecture that told a story that they couldn't hide, so they had to destroy these architecture. And I'll put a little video down below about our stolen history, and all of us have had our resets done to us. History is stolen from us and given this new history to build pride in the system that they built around us that enslaves us, right? And so there is like a lot of evidence that points at Ethiopia being like a major power, that like you can see the Ethiopians were a part of everything. There's even evidence that Jerusalem was built by Ethiopia, and that's stuff that nobody talks about, right? Because Jerusalem is that magic place, and they're like, well, who is the originator of there? Well, the oldest inscriptions seem to show as Ethiopia was the originals, but who knows who did a reset back then 10,000 years ago, right? So yeah. My people also feel hundreds of years of tentative uncertainty. Where the artifacts will fall out of Solomon's wall, you'll see it rediscovered in 10 centuries BC. So it's like there's hundreds and hundreds of years of people just uncertain about what the past was, right? And that when you don't know your past, you don't know your future, because this is how the world works. Is it's repeating, stories are repeating themselves, right? So if you want to confuse civilization, then just tell a different story than what happened, and that'll actually cause that story to repeat itself. So this is how we can take natural human stories and corrupt them by controlling people's perception, and that's controlling people's perception of of their history, right? And the artifacts, like that was a big part of the art, like the artifacts that came out of Solomon. That was a lot to do with the what the heck are these names of these guys? It doesn't matter. There was the warriors. I talked about them in another video, but they were protecting Solomonic traditions, and some even believe that they may have protected the Ark of the Covenant, and they were protecting Solomon's temple, and they were digging in Solomon's temple to find all these artifacts, and these artifacts are resurfacing, or at least the information of them, because they probably resurfaced back then, but nobody heard about it because nobody could see it on a news article or on YouTube or on their phone. So it's we don't know when things are rediscovered. And when we look at the Nag Hammadi libraries and the Dead Sea Scroll, it seems pretty interesting the time that it was discovered. Oh, they just found it in 1945, 1946, right after the war. Maybe it was discovered a long time before that, but they had to come up with a story why they didn't tell us sooner. These are ways I look at things. And they're rediscovering the 10th century BC. Like we're realizing as we're with all this stuff that they're finding in Solomon's temple and through the walls, they realize that we have been lied to, and that we don't know how many great resets we've gone through, right? Just to change our past, we change our future. That's what this big song is about. And there is a trend through this album about like awakening people and telling people about go look at this, go look at the evidence over here. He doesn't like tell too much about it, but he's like you hear these little things, and that's why this album is so full of intricacy. And actually, all of his music, he does this. He's teaching people through just like a little here, and you're like, what is he talking about there? And then you go research, and like, oh, there's what he's talking about. There's some alternate histories that we need to start looking at that are actually backed up by archaeological discoveries, right? After the Lion of Judah bust the seals, many things revealed. So they believe in the another. So like right after, they called like the Lion of Judah was Haile Selassie, and he um, he awakened a lot of people right before the World War. And then the World War happened, and then we discovered these libraries. Interesting, right? Well, I think it had more to do with Haile Selassie than people realize, right? But also, I believe that there's many Lions of Judah's, and like it's more of an archetypal story, right? So like the people that are fighting against this craziness in the world and they're pushing against it, in every time that they push, they're being that conquering lion to conquer this peaceful world. And that's the light versus dark, right? Conquer sounds pathological, doesn't it? Well, that's not the case, right? They conquer through psychology, by becoming dangerous psychologically, and that's how they conquer, right? And it's better to be dangerous psychologically for benevolent cause than to be, you know, tear everybody to pieces physically for that, which does happen too. And there might be a situational morality that allows that to be okay, right? I'm not going to discuss that now. So after the Lions of Judah bust the seals, he's many things revealed, so things got revealed. But now there's many conquering lions revealing stuff. Anybody that's fighting against this dark is revealing lots of stuff. This is the Great Awakening, and with the Great Awakening comes the Great Judgment, which is prophesied by the Book of Enoch. So they take out the names and change and put them in. They won't erase my ancestors of the scene off the scene. Visceral crystalline animosities against archaeologies, right? So what they're saying there is you take out, you're changing names, right? They like took out the name of this city and put in different names so nobody would know about it. Like there's no papers that show what about this city being a different civilization, right? And you take one name out and put in another. It doesn't erase our ancestors off the scene. They were there and we know about them and we still have them in our blood. And so we're breathing them in the air that they breathed, you know. Who's sitting in the root, alabaster piece of trained monkeys carrying a basket for fine paints and maybe jewelry. Well, there's like evidence of alabasters. I think it's a kind of rock, and so they have these old alabaster monkeys, and they're from so long ago, and they were trained monkeys that were delivering, like, you know, paints and fine jewelries and stuff like that. And it's like, what civilizations did we have, right? Like it proves some different stories and visage like I think they're talking about like there there's like a lot of pictures of our ancestors and their heads being different shapes and like different things, like there's um you know so there's ancestors of like some kind of human being or alien maybe that is not completely related with us, right? And we have evidence of that, not just the elongated skulls that have been found, but also just like carved in stone things. But also not only that, when people try to change history by, like, you know, color coding history, like the religious things happen, people like to know, oh, my bloodline did this story, not this one. Well, you know what, we're all fighting the same fight, so let's stop needing to have each other's bloodlines be the ones that fought these fights in the end, right? Or in the past, right? But the when we do have these like color coding things that happen to society, like you know, we have some people are like, oh, the pharaohs were black and the pharaohs were white, and look at all the when you go look at the different faces, you can see when they were white, right? Because there is like we have different faces, different shapes of our visceral shapes to ourselves. So you can see like that you know, the Nubian Empire was definitely black, you know what I mean? And there's a lot of empires just before that that were like in between black and white, and that everything right past King Tut, which was like the last of the of, let's say, it was the last of that bloodline. That's when it went from white, which is the really skinny face, to more like mixed races, and that's when we went into the Israeli Golden Age, which also was the time of unity, which when people stopped uh, putting people in power because of how they looked rather than what they were made up of as a human, right? So we have to, if we want to like know about the past, you know, instead of being so biased and needing it all to be about our ancestors, we're all from the same ancestors. Okay, like, you know, this earth has been feeding us. We're the same life force feeds us. So it's the same life force that's upon us, right? It was for the princes everything built ready, as built ready, to know my way clean, like the whole world will be moved to multi-nutrition green. And yeah, no, like there's some things I don't really know what he's on about in there, but um, find out what is the parallels in spiritual, psychological nutrition and take it in. World agenda, a great well card to greeting was sent to meet. You know, I think if I was gonna try to like guess what any of that means, find out what's the parallels. Like we have to know that there's connection through your spirit, psychological, and nutrition, right? And that those are he's talking in the sense of like if you hide these things from people and teach them maybe different ways of being spiritual, like controlling people's religion and what they think spirituality is, control their psychology, which is a propaganda through throwing their controlling their perception, and nutrition, which means telling them this is what's healthy for you when maybe that's not, and that's actually a kind of a little culling system, right? You can cull people with ideology, just train them to be unhealthy to themselves, right? But if you train yourself a higher spiritual, which is the spirit that is really talking to you from the inside, when you start to have a relationship with that voice, that's a spirituality, that's meditation, that's like coming to your patience, right? And then psychological is connected to that spirit. You have to realize the psychological is connected with other people, so you have to balance that. And then if you're balancing your nutrition, psychology, and spirituality, then you are becoming an alchemist and become very healthy. And but if you it's both sides of the sword, right? You can start slipping downhill by not taking care of these things. And taking in the world agenda gets well card degrees, Will Smith. Every rumor dispelled when Haile Selassie Rastafari sit on David's seat. So he's talking about, Haile Selassie coming into power, and he was prophesied by Marcus Garvey to come into power, and he came into power, and all the rumors were dispelled because he came out and showed people what the truth was, and that's why Ethiopia still has a connection to ancient knowledge, spiritual knowledge of King David and Solomon, right back to the original roots of Christianity, let's say. So yeah, you set it in, don't feel no way, you know. Changing the names, taking out and putting in won't erase our ancestors off the scene. So that's that song. I don't think there's any other lyrics. Just repeats at that point. But we can see, he's trying to teach people about our history, because then we can, if we find out our true history, we can paint a much more beautiful future together. And I want to say we manifest this future together. If we want to share this environment together, let's get together, unify, and manifest it as the most beautiful painting we can. All right, much love. If you feel like supporting the channel, please email me at melatonic@protonmail.com. MELATONIC @protonmail.com. Much love.